Canada, they were successfully stopping having a moratorium on fracking.
Right, well there you go, yeah.
Oh, with it, yeah, ISDS. Yeah, the ISDS.
We had a funny debate about it last week.
Great. So the other thing, just to mention on shale gas quickly, so lots of the industry claims are saying, right, so if you burn coal, it produces a huge amount of carbon dioxide. If you burn conventional gas, it produces significantly less, which is true. But the problem is the amount of methane that leaks into the atmosphere in the process. So with fracking, there's lots of different estimations of the amount it might be, but it's certainly very high, and it looks, or the balance of evidence at the moment suggests that shale gas has, if you include they call it fugitive methane, the methane leak in the atmosphere, is similar to coal in terms of the emissions, carbon emissions. So it's just not true that moving to shale gas is a way of dealing with climate change. It's just a bit of PR spin from the industry. And they're very keen on keeping it all quiet about fugitive emissions, and they don't want to do any research on it, but the more research is being done on it, the more that suggests that there is very significant leakage of methane. Yep.
Just a point about terminology, because I've noticed recently that the shale gas fracking industry is using shale gas, whereas activists always use fracking.
Yeah.
And I think fracking is better, but...
It's a good word, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of puns.
Activists, because it's so evocative of what's happened to the earth.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering why you're using shale gas.
Well, I'm only using shale gas because I'm talking about something slightly more specific. So shale gas is a type of energy source, and fracking is a technology. So fracking is a technology that's used to extract gas from shale, and it's also used to extract oil from shale, and it's actually used in some of the other ones we're talking about later. But in terms of campaigning, yeah, it's great to talk about fracking, because that really like kind of captures people's imagination and use of puns. So yeah, this is another one. Also in the UK, it's very developed in Australia, where they've had a big kind of movement against it. I'll come to all the resistance stuff a bit later. It's called coal bed methane, and it's basically just where you get, again, it's conventional gas, but it's found alongside coal seams. And it also requires, usually, fracking to get it out, and it also requires pumping out huge volumes of water, and has similar kinds of implications for water pollution. So interesting, that's actually more developed here than shale gas is, and but it's the same kind of problems, and yeah, it's fracking, so we should be worried about it the same way. What have I said there? Yeah, so the same problems with methane leakage for climate change as well.
On methane, I mean, I'm not a scientist whatsoever.
Yes.
But so I believe it's something like 16 times more of a pollutant.
Even more than that, yeah.
But how does that apply to coal bed methane? I mean, what's the relationship in terms of toxicity to coal?
So I think what we're talking about is the how much they warm the atmosphere. Is that what you mean? So if that's the case, so methane is about 25 times more powerful at warming the atmosphere than carbon dioxide, and that's why it's really important. It does depend over which time scale you measure it, that changes it a bit, but it's much more molecule per molecule. It warms the atmosphere much more, so we do have to be concerned about it, but you also have to worry about carbon dioxide as well. And coal bed methane is there's a bit of a lack of research on the amount of how it warms the atmosphere, but it's going to be similar to shale gas basically. So yeah, again, the other thing to take from it is that it's not a solution to climate change. Well, the other thing beyond all of that is, even if it is less than coal, it's still a fossil fuel, and it's still a very large amount of carbon to be put in the atmosphere. You know, that graph with all the bubbles I showed you on earlier doesn't change that at all. We still can't afford to continue using fossil fuels. Anyway, so that's coal bed methane. It's called coal seam gas in Australia, and there's been lots of successful campaigns against it in Australia. So this is an aerial photograph of the impact on the landscape. So all these little dots are individual wells, and so the thing is with coal bed methane and with shale gas is that you have to drill lots and lots of holes all over the place if you're going to get a reasonable amount of gas out of it. So you drill one well, it will produce gas for a bit, but then it will start to run out very quickly, much quicker than conventional. And then you have to drill another one a little bit further away, and then another one. Yeah, and there's estimations that to replace the UK's gas imports, we'd have to have something like 20,000 wells across the country, which in a very small, densely populated country like the UK is particularly bad.
20,000 on the Sussex Weald alone, actually.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Well, even more than that then, yeah. So the Sussex Weald, by the way, is one of the kind of the geological formations where there's lots of shale gas. There's lots of it in around Blackpool as well, in Lancashire. So this one I'm not going to talk about too much because Sue's going to go into some more detail on it later. So tar sands, it's like a really thick, dense form of oil. And it's mixed in with lots of sand. Almost all of it, like 90% of it, is in this one big lump in Canada. It's the size of England though, so it's pretty big. And it's always, they know about it for a long time, and it's always been that it's really expensive and really difficult to extract. But just recently, because of stuff like the rising price of oil and because countries want to be more secure in getting their energy supplies, then they've started to extract it, and now they're extracting it on a very large scale. Yeah, go on.
Very quick question. I know that they're also extracting some fields in Utah, and
that's right.
They were thinking about extracting some Madagascar and quite a few other places around.
Yeah.
Is that taking off or not really?
It is, yeah. So the like I said, so 90% of it is all found in one deposit in Canada, but there are a few other places. So there's Utah in the States. There's Congo Brazzaville in Central Africa, and Trinidad and Tobago and Madagascar. There's a few other places where they're doing it. So on a much smaller scale, but obviously it's still a big problem, and it hasn't really taken off yet, but it will do unless it's stopped. Luckily, in Utah, for example, there's been lots of really successful protest stuff against it. I mean, lots of these problems are going to be much more difficult when it all starts to move to Africa, where it's a lot harder to stop the industry because they've got much more power, and they've got lots of other problems that they have to deal with as well. So here's a lovely picture of strip mining for tar sands. You can kind of see that. Can we turn these lights off possibly, and maybe keep the back ones on?